Anna Banana would like to hear Venus by Bananarama. Banana. That's right. The wood carving championships, the car washing finals, and a spelling bee. You know that's right. We're reviewing the second episode of Psych on the second episode of this podcast.
I've heard it both ways.
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 And welcome back to I've Heard It Both Ways. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe, and with me is my partner, 6-inch Hoops. Hoops, how's it going?
It's going good. 2 for 2. I love it. I really love it. That's good stuff. I didn't fumble the opening this week, so I'm happy about that. And, talking about one of my favorite episodes of Psych of all time. I know we're going to hear that a lot on this podcast, but I truly, truly do love this episode.
Yeah, it's a fun episode, as we talked about last week. Season 1, if you were to ask me off the top of my dome, like, and I would maybe struggle to name a few episodes, but you go back, you start watching it, and the Spelling Bee is right up there with them. It's a little bit different than the rest of the Psych episodes that we're used to seeing, but it's the first episode coming off the pilot, and it's a lot better than I remember.
Yeah, it's a great episode, and it has a lot of, as a new character in there for you. We'll get to that all in a little bit. We'll take you through our process. Of course, we start with a holla. Then we like to end with a creamsicle. And then, of course,
in the middle, we get a Thundercats.
Ho! So, I don't know. You want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So we saw last week, with the pilot, we saw Lassie and his partner. They have wisely axed Lassie's old partner, and we get introduced to the lovely Juliette O'Hara. So with this episode, as you'll see, sprinkled intermittently throughout the series, is that we don't get an immediate flashback to when they're kids. We get Sean walking into a restaurant, and this is when we meet Juliette. And Sean, as his nature, begins to flirt with her. And we get one of my favorite gags right off the bat with this scene. And it's Sean doing Juliette voice. And he does it in this high-pitched voice, just like this. And it's really, it's obnoxious, but it's so funny.
Well, it sounds like I'm in 8th grade. Well, in my portrayal of you, you only have an 8th grade education.
Which is one of my favorite lines, because you get that, because the way he delivers it, and she gives him that wry smile. I wrote that. I wrote that line in the notes because it's just great. It's just that little bit of Sean that's just but Juliette eats it up, and this is really that moment, that line, that exchange is the beginning of the dynamic between these two's relationship. And it's just one of my favorite moments between the two. And so we get introduced to Juliette, and Sean finds out that she's a cop because of the vantage point and everything. And she holds up her gun for the first time, and
hate the shaking of the gun, because
it makes her look weak.
It makes her look weak. I think they try to play her as a little bit timid. And then as the show goes on, obviously you find out she's a badass from the Miami Police Squad. By the way, Miami, I think it is still the #1 most dangerous place to be a cop in the whole world. And she's a detective. So if you're a detective, I don't know the police force that well, have a couple of friends on it, but if you make it to detective, I'm pretty sure you've pulled your gun out once before. Didn't love that line. One of the very few things I'll pick apart in this episode, because it's a brilliant episode.
Yeah, I felt the same way rewatching it again last night. Is I wish they hadn't done that, because she's not meek, she's not timid. She is a very, very strong character, and that's part of the reason why we love Juliette so much. But we get that little introduction to her, and then we get the theme song, and then we get the flashback. And so, as we talked about last week, a lot of times these flashbacks there's a little lesson in there that's applied to the episode, and we don't get that here. We get the second out of the 4 Seans, the worst Sean.
Oh, the absolute worst.
This is he looks like a squid, he acts like a squid, just Squid City coming from this kid. But it's the aim of the episode is the Spelling Bee, and surprise,
with 2
surprise,
G's spelt wrong.
and surprise, it's Gus, up there on stage in the Spelling Bee, and he's nervous, and he looks to Sean for help, and he foolishly takes Sean's suggestion on how to spell it and gets eliminated, and then adjournamento.
A good old adjournamento. I knew it wasn't O.
And then we come back to the present, and Gus is watching the national spelling, or the local
The Bee.
spelling bee. Right.
It's on
I
Sports
love it.
Cal too. It's hosted by Bud Collins. It's a big
Yeah.
event.
Big event. And what I love about this is one of the many things that Gus gets like super amped up about. It's the Bee, it's American duos. There's these weird, obscure things that Gus
everything. He makes a yearly donation to wildlife. He's on the largest online page to abolish taxidermy. Like, he has like all of these tiny little trope things
the
throughout the
locksmith
series. Yeah, the locksmith online subscription to Safe Cracker magazine, which they even talk about in the first episode.
Yep.
So that's just like, he's got all the nicknames, he's got all the weird little quirks. I absolutely love the way they build his character as this super mega nerd, and the way that Sean's like, did they bump the car washing championships for this? Is this getting in the way of the wood carving finals? Like, and that's
please tell me that's Korean porn.
Yes. Right? How come I can't get you decide about girls or Mexico?
Right.
It's such like. This is the skinny Sean, a little too cool for school Sean, like your wife would say. But just a brilliant back and forth, even to start the episode, and a fun little tidbit when he goes, Brandon Vu is the kid, or Brendan Vu is the kid who missed the word because of the inhaler. He goes Bandon Dunes, and this is their first time to do it, and I've heard it both ways, and they don't take it because Gus is like, "You mean Brendan Vu?" And Sean just kind of looks at him and goes, "Eh." So they didn't even have our name of the podcast yet in the episode, but that was a perfect spot for it, and you're going to see that a lot more with Sean messing up on purpose for I've heard it both ways. Yeah,
which I love. And so and I love that when Gus is this into something, Sean is always there to bust his balls about it, right? And it's not like Sean isn't without his quirks and all, right, the things that he loves, but especially with all the 80s movies and Judd Nelson. But I just love that back and forth, especially in this moment. But so speaking of, Brandon Vu, we get our boo-hoo for Vu. So this is where the case unfolds for the episode, where they're watching the Bee, and you see Brandon Vu sort of, have a seizure, and then he faints on stage, and then they get a call from Chief Vic. Yep. We need you to come down. We need you to investigate the inhaler situation. Oh, look who joined us. Thank you, Dork Boys. Sunburn Boys are with us today. And so they go down to the Bee to investigate the inhalers. And then this is again, you get Gus, going all in on the Bee.
Oh, yeah. Stop giving it hip little nicknames. And I love for the fact when you go into it and Bud Collins is announcing, and the first word that they have is butyraceous, which is having the characteristics of butter. And every time Bud Collins comes back, he said, "The tension is butteraceous, Bud." There's always a little bit of that like sprinkled throughout. That's I just love that about Psych, that they have those little tidbits all over the place hidden in the episode.
Yeah, stop hating on the Bee, Sean. And what's
do you know how to spell any of those words? Proudly, no. I file those words under things to say, things to get ridiculed by, or words I use to get kicked out of bed.
Yeah, AKA the Billy D maneuver.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's great. So you get a classic case of Gus trying to show off in front of Sean. But then as they're sort of investigating that, this is now where we get the real case of the show, and that's the supposed murder or foul play, where the spellmaster, right, falls off the balcony, lands on the ground, and now they've got a case, but they have to somehow try and prove that chicanery is afoot. So again, this is just
not to belittle this guy's life, but this is more interesting than the wood covering finals.
Yeah, right. See, this is what we got. This is what we got. We got Billy coming in with all the little bits and pieces. So this is so Sean gets a little suspicious, right, of what happens. Lassie, in classic Lassie fashion, just wants to. He's a fat guy. He had a heart attack. No case here. Let's move on. But Gus wants Sean to say that it's murder, because Gus is in his element here. So they go up to the booth. They sort of they're scoping things out a bit, right? Sean's looking at the food, goes, hey, I think the fat guy, theory kind of holds up here. And this right here, Billy, what do we get right here? That's
super
right.
smeller, which and we missed the little bit part, and I actually don't like this, so I'm kind of glad you skipped it. But I will throw them under the bus when need be. When he does the whole way to get in there, he's really over the top in the way that he goes about it with feeling the dead guy's spirit and kind of being choked, and that's how he weasels his way in there. But we do get the super smeller because he says he smells something like sulfur. They have the little back and forth. I'm not the one who had eggs for lunch. And he's like, this is the best thing because again, Sean goes at him for his goofiness, and he's like, stop calling your nose the super smeller. If you're gonna name a part of your body after something, name your butt, man. Call it the tight bouncer or the hexagon. Right. Chicks are gonna dig that. So, but it does come into play, and they find out that the Chinese food is poisoned with some sort of something. So he takes it in a little bag to go in case he wants to eat something that can later kill himself later, as Sean would say. But Gus, Johnny on the spot. Sean gets them in, but Gus is the one who gets that key piece of evidence.
Yeah. And so, I skipped that because that's the one thing. And my wife and I were talking about this last night is that's sort of like only my one real critique. Like it's one thing, like, when he's like super over the top, super outrageous with the psychic vision stuff. Like sometimes it's done right and it's well placed, but other times it's just it felt a little too much, and so that's why I kind of glossed over.
Yeah, it's just fine. They're fine tuning this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point it out because I will point out the flaws, and there's very few.
Oh yeah, very few. But that was one of them. But so that's right where he smells something very sulfuric, right? And he gets down there. So they take a piece of the noodles, and Sean does what Sean needs to do on almost an episode basis. Is he seeks the guidance of his father. So this is where we have the beep 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 beep, the Henry prick alert.
Well, you know what? Today I realized it's tough love, and it's way too tough a love, but it is still tough love. He wants to guide Sean. He doesn't believe this is his career path for the future, so he wants to make everything about it earned for him.
And I want to talk a little bit more of this when we get to when we get down towards the end into the creamsicle part of the show, because while Henry is a prick in this moment, the intentions are very good. And I'll dive into this a little bit deeper. But there's a way of, I'm a firm believer, there's a way of going about things. There's a way of having teachable moments and trying to instill some lessons without always having to be a fucking hardo about it. Right. But this is one of the rare times where Henry actually makes a joke. Right. Sean holds up the baggie full of the noodles and he goes, "What's that? Number 15 with chicken?"
Oh, Dad, you made a joke.
Yeah, Dad, you made a joke. So Sean asks him for help. He needs to have the noodles analyzed. Yep. Analyzed for poison, because obviously he can't just bring it to the cops because he needs to, play up the whole psychic shtick, but also, stealing evidence from a crime scene is not, not legal. So Henry refuses to do it. He says, I'm not getting involved in your cases, Sean, which you can understand. But Sean says, I'll do anything. And then Henry goes, okay. And then Sean replies, well, usually people wait 5-6 whole minutes,
cash in a favor.
You cash in a favor. And then this is where Henry, makes Sean, build a doghouse. And then we get another flashback here to Sean wants a dog, and we'll dive into this scene a little bit more detail, towards the end, because there is a little bit to unpack here, and I do want to talk about Henry and Sean's relationship a bit. But eventually, Henry, agrees, to have his friend take a look at it, but Sean still has to build the outhouse, and surprise, surprise, it is not up to Henry's standards. So then.
I gave you specifications. When I gave you the job in 1989.
See, again, right? Being a prick, right?
Well, I don't love the whole doghouse thing. I don't. I think it's a weak flashback. I think you could have came up with something a little bit better than a doghouse. It's not believable that he would hold onto a doghouse for, at this point in time, almost 20 freaking years. That's insanity. So
the idea, the premise of what he's trying to teach here, where that chances are earned kind of thing, right? That's a good lesson. It's a good teachable moment there. But this particular thing is fucking asinine. Absolutely asinine.
An 8th grade kid can't build a doghouse by himself.
Yeah. And then to hold on to it and then make a late 20-something, early 30-something. We'll unpack this.
I do kind of like that, though.
So we get a frustrated Sean. He gives up. He's pissed off. He gets on his motorcycle and he takes off. And as he's driving away, you see a van, come up behind him really fast and runs him up off the road. And this is where we will get to the Thundercats.
Oh, is this also the only time we have ever seen Sean riding his motorcycle? We've seen him on it 1 or 2 other times, but this might be the only time he's physically like on the road driving it.
I want to say, I think there's at least one other episode where he's riding it.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure. You might be correct in that. This is the only time we actually see him riding it. I know he talks about a lot that the motorcycle is a common theme. But I want to say there's at least one more episode where he's riding the hog. But that's actually a good point. So Gus and Sean need to do some more investigating. So they go visit the VU. Right, they go visit the VU at the hospital, and this is another instance in this episode where Gus is the star.
Oh yeah,
he's
solving the crime left and right.
Yeah, Gus really is the star of this episode, which I love. I love those episodes when Gus is the one that is. He's never going to take the lead or take charge, but it's Gus giving you all the information that Sean needs to prove it.
The greatest cable character of all time is Burton Guster, Brutal Hustler, whatever you want to call him. He is so good. Even in this episode, he does training on everybody's route, and he's on, the route in Ventura that Dr. Zavin, Miklush or whatever you want to call him, his inhaler is supposed to be on, and he realizes that doctor doesn't exist. Yeah. So clearly they swapped the inhalers. So, it's just one of those things where Gus and all of his little tropey things, whether it's the spelling bee or it's the, safe cracking, any of those things, or just his knowledge of drugs from the pharmaceutical stuff, he comes into play and he basically is the one solving the crime, like you said, half of the time.
Yeah, his brains and his contributions are so understated, but so important throughout this series. Magic Head. And we get the episodes where Gus is more over the top than we're used to seeing him. There's episodes where he's a lot more the straight man. And this is a great episode where he's a little bit of both, right? He's a little bit of both because you see sort of that over the topness with the spelling bee stuff. But then, when it comes to, did you see the name of the doctor? Dr. Zavin. That doctor doesn't, I know every doctor in Santa Barbara, that one doesn't exist. And that's sort of what clicks to say, okay, well, there's something going on here. And so Sean has an epiphany and he says, I have to go back and I have to do something. And so he goes back to Henry's house and he attempts to finish the doghouse, because Sean realizes in that moment, okay, we got to figure out who committed this crime. We need to know, if those were poison or not, because the police department won't analyze them in time because there isn't the proof for it. So they have to figure out a way to get them to do that. So he goes back to the house and Henry sees him working on the doghouse and doesn't expect to see Sean do that. And Henry starts helping Sean, right? And Sean says, Dad, I don't think you've ever helped me with anything in my life.
You've never asked.
Right. And that is those two's relationship in a nutshell.
And that's a dickhead thing for a dad to say, too. Like, it's your son. He doesn't have to ask for help, especially when he's young. And now you're going to help him out when he's in his early to mid, late 20s, early 30s. It's a nice moment that they share. I do like it. I do like that he has to build a doghouse. I think that you could have picked something a little bit better, but in the end, it is funny, and it even works out in the very, very end of the episode for a nice joke. So it's a nice twist to it. But he gets all of the information that he needs about the poker from Jim Sicklin's poker game. Yeah. Henry didn't even have to do anything. The poker game was at the crime labs. the guy who works at the crime lab at the poker game was at his house.
Yeah.
So he already had the report ready to go. You know, it was a high grade, poison. So he knows it's poison. He knows somebody was out to get him. He brings it to the police. Lassie blows him off. And to me, that is a great dynamic of their relationship starting to butt heads with each other, because that is the other, huge driving force in this show. And it's really bad early how much they hate each other.
Yeah, it is. And it's a great moment because he lashes out at Chief Vic. He says, Karen, kick him out already. And then she just shoots him this look, kind of knocks him down a peg. But it is those two rams butting heads that makes their dynamic work so great, because I think what it really helps is those moments where those two need each other. It makes it that much more important. Right. And we'll see that down the line where Lassiter, goes to Sean for help. He goes to Gus for help, and feet don't fail me now. Right. And then the relationship that they develop, in the later on seasons, where it becomes one where they won't acknowledge that they respect each other, but it's very clearly they do. And that is all made believable. And from what we get in these early seasons with them just button heads, all the time.
It's almost a little bit too much for me, but I see why they do it. I see why they establish it as such a, good guy, bad guy, black, white, polar opposites of each other. Then you have Juliette and Chief Vic kind of play in the middle. Lassie even gets pretty nasty at certain points, in the middle of their seasons with Gus, which I don't care for at all, because Gus is my favorite. But really good stuff going back and forth. So Sean can really, it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to solve this one. And that's another thing that they do really well, not only hiding the villain, and it could be anybody in this, when they're, kind of combing through all the victims. That's another good moment when he's ridiculing all of the kids for, you're wasting your entire childhood. And they're like, it builds all of these things. It builds character, competition. He's like, what also builds that? A hot dog eating contest. Yeah. And you get hot dogs. So, you're set up to like, Sean's not going to be able to solve this. The time's running out on this episode. What's he going to do? And then I think this is the best part of the episode when they break back into the box.
Yes. So I think it's like 30, 35 minutes before you kind of get a sense of who, the villain, might be. And so that there's the interim spellmaster out there, smoking, and Sean just closes the door, and
he's got to learn it sometimes. Smoking's bad for him, Gus.
Yeah. And so they get in there, and this is probably, I think, the funniest part of the episode.
It might be the funniest part of the season.
Yeah, it
really is, I think.
You might be right, because it is such a great 5 minutes. And it's just boom, 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 boom. It's quick. It's back and forth. So they get back into the booth, and unbeknownst to them, it's time to give out some words to spell.
Oh, it is.
And so Sean is trying to look for clues. Gus is saying, Sean, we got to go. We can't be in here. And then he's got the guy in his ear saying, we need a word. We're going live. We need a word. So Sean's asking Gus for help, and Gus is, being stubborn.
It's great because he goes, give me a word, something hard, but something you can spell. I can spell anything. Well, except Giordamento. So then Sean has to kind of freelance. So he like, you think he finds the word list because he looks at something and goes, banana. And it's just fucking hilarious. And Gus is like, banana? This is the third round.
That's my favorite part. This is the third round. And then he's like, well, then help me. And then he goes into the banana,
when the kid is like, definition?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
A yellow fruit.
Yellow fruit? Can you use it in a sentence? And that's the cold open that we did. And a banana would like to hear Venus by Bananarama. Banana. And like, it's just so outrageous. And usually the outrageous stuff kind of is like, but that is fucking hysterical. The next word is onion.
Yeah. And then you get Bud Collins going, onion? Even Dan Quayle could spell that. Right?
Which is like a joke that's like 20 years old in itself, because
30 years old, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Dan Quayle, I think, couldn't spell, I forget what the word was. It's some like school potato.
Yeah. He's an E at the end of it or something.
Yeah, moron. I'm a terrible speller, but I can spell onion. And Dan Quayle can too. And then like you realize it's like, you're going off a shopping list. You didn't want to help me. And then the last one is Mitchum.
And the kid's just like, huh? That's a definition.
His face is so great too. That is like, I got to do that as like a GIF or a meme. Like when he just goes, huh?
Yeah.
It's an incredible face.
Yeah, and that's an instance where the kid asking for a definition makes sense, because when was the last time you fucking saw Meacham? You know?
When I go to Albertson, I buy Mitchum Ice Blast.
So that was just a great sequence, and it's in that moment where we finally know exactly who the killer is. So there's a telescope in the room, and earlier on when they first broke into the booth, there's a spellmaster's notepad, and there's some notes on there. He was very clearly suspicious of someone for cheating. And then when he looks in the telescope, it is zoomed right in on, we're going to call this fellow the Czech.
The Czech, because they were looking at Rule 1953. So they're like, okay, they were looking at the Czech. So they have some pieces to the puzzle. Kavanaugh wrote down 1953. So it wasn't a rule because they don't number them like that. It wasn't the contestants because they only go up to 200. So they go down, they're trying to solve it, and then Sean puts it all together because who? Gus figures out that the father won the spelling bee in 1953, 1957. So they realize that he is using the inhaler that's in his son's hand has a transmitter in it. He has a little thing on his wrist. So he's basically tapping out Morse code to his son what the answers are. So he puts it all together that, Kavanaugh was wise to it. And that's why the Czech had to eliminate him.
Right, and this goes back to Brendan Vu. So what happened is they were both using. Brendan Vu actually needed an inhaler. Mm-hmm. He must have grabbed the wrong one, and so when he was up there, the buzzer went off, and it sent the kid into an epileptic type seizure, and so that's how it kind of ties everything together, which is great. So we get a classic psychic vision reveal here. Where he calls everyone in, and the Czech, is obviously, denying it. And the piece that ties it all together is that Juliette went behind Lassiter to have the noodles analyzed because she wanted to play a hunch. Mm-hmm. And this is another domino falling in the the relationship of Sean and Juliette that we love. I mean, that is one of the best aspects of this show, is that will they, won't they? And I think when we get to it, they did it at the right time, right? Because a lot of times you see this shit play off way too early, and where do you go? No, this was a slow burn, mm-hmm. and they built it up so wonderfully. And this is one of those first pieces where you see that relationship of them trusting each other and looking out for each other and having each other's backs. And so this was a great way to sort of wrap up the case. Lassie was pissed.
Oh yeah, he hated it. But I'm so glad you said that, and that's another medal that we can give this show. I think it does the best. Couple of hairy parts in later seasons, but it does the best at building that romance and not giving it away early, and kind of having points where you think they're going to get together, and they get together in the mid to end of season 5, and they kind of keep it a secret until season 6. It's not a spoiler if you are watching along with us. You figure out that this is how all of these shows are built, but they do such a good job of keeping them apart for so long. So when they get together, it is a really special moment. And Lassie is fuming that he was able to solve this, and he even asks Karen Vick, "Do you want me to call the police? Oh no, do you want me to cuff him? Why would I want you to do that?"
Yeah. So that was a great way to tie up the case. And then what we get next is Sean and Gus are kind of outside, and Sean is telling Gus it was a good thing that he didn't win the spelling bee, because they got to take a look at all the kids and just how terrible their lives are, that they have to keep
he'd be ridiculed for it. This way he got to be a cool kid and a smart kid.
Yeah. And so this is where Sean admits to Gus that he purposely misspelled aggiornamento. Mm-hmm. And Gus was pissed. And it was just a great Sean's limping around because he injured his leg in the motorcycle crash, and it was Sean's way. We've seen this you'll see this a number of times throughout the series, where Sean does things to help Gus, because Gus doesn't always, as smart as he is and as put together he is, he sometimes can't see beyond his nose on some of these things, and so Sean's there to
that's a dick move, though. That's a dick move. He studied for 3 months. He did get charged up enough afterwards to kiss, I think it was Melinda Castleberg, because he was so mad that he lost the spelling bee. So I guess it was good for him. It was good for the show, because obviously we wouldn't have, Gus was off at some IT Ivy League school, he wouldn't be a part of the show.
I mean, this was definitely to Sean's benefit, no doubt. And I think, 1 second, we have a Swaggin sighting.
Oh my God!
Can you say hi? Say hi. Wave. Say
hi.
Say, come on, son. Say, I've heard it both ways. Say, wait for it.
Cutest kid ever.
Can I have a hug and a kiss? Hug and a kiss.
Oh, all right, guys. Again, 2 for 2 with Swaggins on the podcast. It's without a doubt the cutest podcast in the DSG. That's
that's right. But yeah, this is another instance too where Gus really gets screwed. He gets screwed by Sean the Spelling Bee. He gets screwed by his parents because they didn't send in the application to the school he wanted to go to. Right. So, but I think it all worked out really well.
Minor.
Yeah. And so, and then the one of the other great parts of this episode is the very, very end where you see Sean. He's showing up at Henry's house. He's just saying, thank you, and then he doesn't hand him a puppy, but there's a puppy tied, right next to the doghouse there, and then Sean runs away, and Henry is friggin' pissed.
Well, it is great because he kind of flips the lesson back on him. He's like, a dog needs a doghouse, and a doghouse needs a dog. So then he walks away, and you see it. And Henry's reaction is beautiful. I will leave it in the street. And you find out it's just Sean's neighbor's dog. They're going to take a lap around the block, come back and get it. But it is a great Sean moment. And I feel like the Sean and Henry relationship in the first one is a little too tough for my liking. This one's a little bit softer. They kind of add, some divorce sprinklings in or throughout. But their relationship is a key part of the show. I hate the hat counting, but other than that, I think it's a really strong selling point. There's so many good relationships in this show that they build incredibly well. There's the Sean and Henry one. There's the Sean and Lassie one, obviously the Sean and Jules, and then Gus. Sean and Gus, I've established, is the greatest television friendship ever. But the interplay that Gus has with everybody is pretty good as well. Yeah.
And like Gus and Lassie, when they're on the same page, especially with the episode with the dry ice, right? I think his feet don't fail me now. Oh, yeah. And then, but then also when they're button heads, because Lassie gives it to Gus, but Gus, it's one of the rare moments where you really see a fired up Gus. Mm-hmm. But those two together are just perfect. So we will slide into the creamsicle here, bite into the creamsicle, if you will. And, we'll kind of, you talk about the episode sort of a little bit more back and forth, but this is where I want to, before I give my overall thoughts on the episode, talk about the Henry Sean moment. Because yes, Henry is a firm believer in tough love. And sometimes it's very positive. Sometimes I think it's very detrimental. And in this case, in this episode, what Henry is trying to do is very sound. It's very important. It's a very important lesson that he's trying to teach Sean. The problem is that the way he goes about it, I think, is a bit obtuse. Right, the whole doghouse thing. I like the line where he said, "Chances are earned, Sean. They're not given." Right, and that's a very important lesson as a parent to teach their child. And you want to teach teach your child to be have some semblance of self-reliance. Right, not always going and getting the help that having the parents do everything for them, essentially. Right. And so that's essentially what this is trying to achieve. But the way he goes about it is maybe in 1988, the building the doghouse thing applied. But so many years later, when he's adult, no, it doesn't. It doesn't fucking apply. Find some other way to get Sean to earn, what it is that he needs.
I kind of like it. I actually do kind of like it. I do, because he does say, "You've never finished a thing in your life. Now you finish something." It is a little ridiculous.
It is. It's ridiculous, but the premise, right?
But I think having a almost 30-year-old man build a doghouse for no dog is kind of funny.
Yeah. But to me, I find it a bit ridiculous. The lesson that he's trying to teach is a fantastic lesson. It's a very important one. It's just there's these moments where Henry, is trying to teach Sean a lesson, and it's a little asinine. It's a little hardo. It's a little bit, teetering on the side of being a prick. But this was a lesson unlike, how we sort of act and treat him in the first episode that I could wrap my mind around a little bit, better. And the fact where, Sean says, I don't think you've ever helped me with anything in my life. And Henry, replied, well, you've never asked. I get that in a sense because he's trying, he's always trying to teach his son to be self-reliant, self-sufficient. But there is times as a parent where, you do want to jump in and give some guidance. I mean, I feel like if I was helping Swaggins build a doghouse, I wouldn't just build it for her, but I would help. I would at very least offer help. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's some times and things where I think Henry just sort of takes it to the nth degree because he's trying to make Sean in Henry's vision and not letting Sean be Sean. Right. In his right. And, so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. And I think it'll be fun when we start to sprinkle in some of these character studies throughout, the process of doing the show. Because we definitely need to do one on Henry and then doing one on Sean, doing one on Gus and Juliette and all that. So that was my thing on Henry. I don't know if there was anything about that you wanted to add or not.
I actually liked it. I didn't mind it as much. I kind of liked him making him build the doghouse because, I mean, how else are you going to, make him learn a lesson? He's, in his late 20s. I actually should find out exactly how old he is. So I think, if he was in 1989, he was in 8th grade. How old are you in 8th grade? Like 13?
Yeah, right around there. Yeah.
13. Okay. So he's like early 20s and late 20s in this early 30s.
Yeah.
So I think it is funny because he knows he has something over him. I just think it's ridiculous to have held on to a doghouse that is half built for that long in a garage that's probably not that big. But, we're splitting hairs to the nth degree right now.
Right. But that's Henry too. Like with the, the Easter egg hunt.
Oh, yeah.
And,
you buried them 6 feet underground.
Yeah.
I still haven't closed the egg case.
There was fresh dirt on top. That was the clue, right? Kind of thing. So, but anyway, so as a whole, I enjoyed this episode very much, and it's definitely one of the better ones of season 1. But I found it to be just a little bit different than sort of the rest of the episodes, and to me, it felt a little bit more procedural and a little less, a little less with the comedy, like. We talked about like that one moment they had with the comedy was great. It was a killer scene, but we usually get at least maybe a couple of those sprinkled throughout an episode, right? And we had some good one-liners and some good zingers in there, but this one felt a little bit more like we had our pilot. We're going to try and reset and go forward a little bit. So it felt like they scaled back just a touch.
Well, they had to introduce a new main character. They had the shitty flashbacks in this one, like a couple of them, the flashback to the Spellingg Bee and the flashback to building the doghouse. I think they realized we only want 1 or 2 flashbacks to start the show. And then maybe if we really, really need another one, we'll sprinkle it in there. Plus it was the shitty Sean, but I do love the breakdown at the end of the case. And that's another thing that's not really a running gag in the show. It's just kind of like how they end all of it. He breaks down the case and he goes, it meant everything to me, Klush, and I lose my mind every time he says that. But it's a great wrap up to the case, the way he breaks down, the way he figures out he snuck into the booth, sprinkled the stuff in him. That was also, the Czech was also the guy that ran him off the road. Yep. So a lot of good writing that gets you all back to square one in this one. So overall, they always say it on all of our podcasts here in the DSG. High slugging percentage of comedy, not as much sprinkled in your normal Psych episode, but for a second episode, for it to be one of my favorites, really, really well done.
Yeah. And it was just great. And so, but we also lacked a little bit of other things in this. So we didn't get an official Gus nickname, but we did get the Super Smeller.
Oh yeah.
So we didn't get the ghee butter snaps or the Burton TT
Clementine
showbiz,
socks,
right? And we didn't get a hard pineapple.
No, we got a slice.
We got a slice. So I was going to ask you, did you know where the pineapple was?
I had to Google it. it.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm like, I looked at Megan. I said, "Where's the pineapple in this episode?" She goes, "Is it on his shirt or something?" So I Googled it, and it was lame, right? And I don't think they were doing the pineapple in every episode bit. It just happened to do it in episode 1. But when he's building the doghouse, he's talking to his dad. He's holding a slice of pineapple, and that was really it for like little trivia bits. We're always gonna name do the Gus's nickname. Where's the pineapple, and then as the show really gets rolling, there's some really good trivia bits.
Well, just
we'll
the
have in
general
here.
one is that Sean and Juliette were married for quite some time during the process of this whole
Yeah.
show.
That's right. They were. That's right. They were. I don't know when they broke up in real life, but yeah, they were married, and I think that you saw that because their chemistry was so great. Even after they broke up, the chemistry was still great, and that's just a testament to, I think, the characters and the writers, and everything else. So, is there anything else, my friend, that you'd like to add?
The funny thing is that she also married a guy who kind of looks exactly like him.
You're saying she's got a type?
She definitely has a type. We can start doing this if we want to. This got a rating of, it had audience of almost 5 million people, so that's not too bad.
Yeah, especially for a second episode. I think what helped is that USA was a powerhouse at this time.
Oh yeah, just pumping
Right.
them out.
And
I don't
I
know if
think-
I mentioned this on the first podcast, but I used to make fun of everybody who watched USA's or TNT shows. Like, I don't know who the fuck's watching all of these one-named shows, like
Yeah.
Leverage, Monk, The Closer. That's an article in one name. Psych, Suits. Like, who the fuck? Like, where are all of these one-name fucking TV shows coming from? They're like Disney movies, but who watches this shit? And
Right.
little did I know, I was making fun of one of my all-time favorite show.
Yeah, and I think this was the lead into Monk, which was another great show. But yeah, I love it, man, and I'm glad we get to talk about it every week. And so, what we're gonna do is we're gonna end with a little, "Come on, son!
Come on, son.
Come on, son!
Come on, son."
Come on, son!"
So next week we are doing episode 3, which gives us the first official, I think, Gus nickname. One that is like 100% just a off the cuff generated one. It is "Speak now or forever hold your peace," and it is actually spelt like a piece of pie, not like a piece of like the justice of the would hold the peace, all that kind of stuff. When they say at the end of a wedding, it's hold your peace. Like keep the peace, but not this is a piece of pie. So it's a wedding episode. It's a little bit, it's not my favorite episode. Definitely not a classic Psych episode, but there's a ton of good stuff. I think this has more jokes per second,
Yep.
and you get you really get a renegade Sean in this one.
Yeah, and this is a good Sean versus Lassie episode.
Oh, I mean,
Great shenanigans.
it is.
between
It
those
is. You know what? I'm a hyperbole. It's a damn fine episode. But like if we were to rank them in season 1, this would probably be in that meaty part of the middle.
Yeah, and this is what I want to do to recap every season. So when we get to the finale of this season, one of the things I think we should do is rank the season, right?
Oh yeah.
But maybe we can do a podcaster's dozen, or something like that. But Billy, where can the people find us?
They can find me at Billy D2411 on all of these social media platforms. They can find this podcast for right now on the PCP channel. We're going to figure out how to get it on season 2. Hopefully we can have that audio up for you maybe tomorrow or Friday, depending on how the holiday goes for everybody. You can find this, if you're watching here, thank you. You already know you can find it on Facebook. You can find it on Dr. Joe's Twitch. You can find it on our YouTube, the PCP YouTube. And where can the people find you specifically, Joe?
They can find me at Backcracker Dr. Joe on Twitter. You can find me on Twitch at Backcracker _ Dr. Joe. And you can also find me on Instagram at Backcracker Dr. Joe.
Yeah, so this was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed this episode. Again, Spelling Bee with 2 G's, an all-time great one. Just that moment in the box, I think, if you like, we could at the end of this whole thing when we're looking for stuff to do, like ultimate Psych moments, the Anna Banana is really, I think it's at least top 25 Psych moment. And that's really saying something for all of the episodes and great moments that they've had.
Yeah, it's a great moment for sure. And until next week, Billy, wait for it.
Frank says hi.